Dave Birkett here, along with Carlos Monarrez, Freep.com. Carlos comes on in and joins me now. And Carlos,
Were we just
season's
here
over.
yesterday?
It seems like it. Well, not here in Allen Park here, but yeah, it seemed like we just wrapped up the season yesterday. And then today, Matthew Stafford talked, Matt Patricia, and most importantly, I think Bob Quinn. They all held their season-ending news conferences. And, you just said something here before we started recording that, I think is pretty, pertinent to today. That Bob, I think typically Bob's the guy that he's fairly forthright in these things, where he'll answer questions as much as he can. Typically shed some information, shed some light on things. But today it seemed like he didn't have as many answers as usual, and I think on one hand, you sort of expect that there's obviously a very the message that they want to, both Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia, that they want to share with the fans is very coordinated, right? I mean, they've talked about injuries and being close in games and, all these leads that they've had and they're close. But to a man, no one seemed to be able to say how this team can get over the hump next year. And that's really the big question right now, is coming off a 3-12-1 season. What can the Lions do to take that step forward and become playoff contenders next year? And as you said, it just doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of answers right now.
Yeah, it was hard. I mean, even Quinn seemed to just be, rattling off the litany of all the problems. The injuries, the roster stuff, the holding the leads, blowing leads late. There just didn't seem to be a good grasp. And he said, if I had the answer,
Right.
I had a crystal ball, I'd solve it. We wouldn't have all these problems. So that is understandable. And it's a hard season to judge. And I think that, it's easy to be frustrated. It's easy to want to just say, the record is what the record is, especially after 2 years.
I've said that.
You've said that, and get rid of them. And certainly, I don't think there would have been a lot of people angry or upset or whatever if they had been fired. But you can also see the point that they're making, that Bob Quinn did mention all the different guys that were on IR, all the different guys they signed off of practice squads who were playing significant roles late in the season, and still keep the team, competitive and holding leads and all that stuff. So there's something to be said for that. But at the end of the day, there was a lot of, Bob Quinn said himself, there was, head scratching. The staff is looking at these games. There doesn't seem to be some common thread to why they're losing the games.
Right.
And that's almost more worrisome when
That's
you can't
concerning
point
to
to
me.
something. But that's also reality. Reality is gray most of the time. It's not black and white. We have a bad quarterback. We have a bad kicker. We have a bad whatever. This is it. It's a play here and there, a drop pass, or whatever it is, a blown assignment, and that's really what it came down to, I think, in a lot of cases. Like someone pointed out yesterday on Twitter that the Packers beat the Lions twice and never held a lead for a single second in either game. It came down to last-second field goals.
Well, I think to your point, it's easier to understand. It's easier to stomach, I think, when you can point and say it's a kicker's fault, right? Like the Chicago Bears last year, so many problems with their special teams and their kicking, and then you go out and you try to sign a kicker, and maybe that solves them, and you can take that step forward. Or if it's a quarterback, right? Well, we need to get a young quarterback. We need to find our franchise. Well, here with the Lions, they think Matthew Stafford is a guy that's going to lead them into the future. They think Matthew Stafford's going to be healthy going forward. They don't have problems with the kicking game. Certainly I think there are some problems defensively. You and I have both acknowledged that, but I think internally they don't maybe think the problems run as deep as we do, and whether it's in Bob, he did say they'll evaluate coaches and scheme and players and everything this offseason, as they always do, but it's not going to be one of these wholesale changes. There's going to be a lot of new faces, but not wholesale changes. It's going to be the same system no matter who the defensive coordinator is. It's going to be a lot of the same players because they've already gone out and got some of the guys that they feel are foundational pieces. And Bob even said it. He thinks their talent matches up better with some of the playoff teams in their own division now than it did a couple years ago.
You can almost hear, especially sticking with the defense, which is the big problem this year.
Right.
You could almost see, and Quinn, if you read his or you look at his statement about the defense, he kind of lays out the argument that you could almost see him laying out to the Fords when they had their meeting is, what if Deshaun Hand wasn't hurt most of the year? What if Snacks had been the player? They expected him to be an A-level player, and he was a B or probably less than a B player most of the year. Jelani Tavai, tough position to play, linebacker in the NFL. Justin Coleman played well at the beginning, had a dip in the middle, played okay in the end. You can almost see him laying out this whole scenario of certain players didn't really play up to expectations.
My response to that, though, would be, whose fault is that, right? Is that the players, or are you not properly evaluating the players, or taking some of these injury risks that you shouldn't have? The coaching staffs for not getting the most out of them. I mean, that's where it's frustrating to not have the answers.
Yes, and I think that's the unsaid part of this is. You asked specifically. People asked about Quandre Diggs. You asked specifically, did you regret that? And he said no.
Mike. That was our friend of the program, Mike Rothstein.
Mike Rothstein. So I'm sorry. So
don't confuse me with him.
I'm sorry. You
Come on, Rothstein.
I sit in the cheap seats. I never get to see who's talking. But and that was the thing where he explained it. Well, we felt good about how Will Harris was playing, and then Tracy Walker gets hurt right after the trade. So then they're kind of shorthanded, and so that's the thing where he's never going to sit there and say, I regret that decision. I screwed that up. I shouldn't have paid Mike Daniels this much money to get what production out of him. And, the Deshaun Hand, you can't tell who's going to be hurt or whatever all the time. You certainly probably wouldn't have expected Snacks to not be as effective as he was. So there's some give and take there. You should have been more judicious about certain things. Other things you couldn't have seen coming. Maybe some of it is coaching. Right. I doubt it's the case with Snacks, but sometimes it is. Maybe
I think hindsight is always 20/20 in these scenarios. So it's not look, we're talking with the benefit of hindsight, obviously, but when you look back, are you going to say, well, you draft a linebacker that had a shoulder injury and then he gets another one? Maybe that's a risk you shouldn't have taken, right? Or Snacks, this is essentially his third contract, an extension. And do you really pay 30-plus-year-old defensive linemen, give them new money? I mean, that's a lot of people, we point to the Patriot way, and they're trying to build this thing like the Patriots do. Well, the Patriots don't do that. They don't give these guys that sort of contract. And they sometimes they hit on some of these guys that have been cast off. Oftentimes they do. But I think when you have a roster of guys full of those questions, eventually some of them are going to come back to bite you. And maybe that's what's happened in some ways to the Lions. I mean, again, I think the injuries are a valid excuse in a lot of ways in terms of, or a valid explanation, I should say, in terms of what's gone wrong on the field this year. But to me, they don't excuse what's gone on because you have to prepare for it. That's life in the NFL. And there's been, there were so many issues before, the thing really went sideways when Matthew Stafford went down, especially defensively, that I think I understand all the fans' frustration out there, and I have my own doubts going forward about how this thing gets fixed and whether they can take a big enough leap next year. Matt Patricia had talked about, and Matthew Stafford talked about, it was clearly a message that Matt Patricia told players today that, how X number of teams every year make the leap from non-playoffs to playoffs, 5 this year, and there's always a worst to first scenario, and the Lions, they need to make that jump next year, but I have my doubts that they can do it.
Well, I think that it's fair to have those doubts. It depends on what they do as far as adding the pieces on defense, and who's in charge of that defense outright.
It's going to be Patricia.
Outright. Yeah, not having a puppet defensive coordinator, but having the guy, having him be accountable for that. And the big thing is, obviously, I think that, people just don't talk about it enough because they pretend it's not an issue, but it was Matthew Stafford. If he doesn't get hurt, I think Quinn even said, Jeff Driscoll played well enough in 2 out of those 3 games that he played to win the game, meaning if the defense had played better, they would have won those games. So, certainly with Stafford, you have a much better chance. That's going to be a big question, and Bob Quinn says that's in play. They might draft a quarterback. It's not totally out of the realm of possibility. It's probably not happening, but he knows that other teams will be interested and they can move down and whatever else. But they do need to address that position. We talked to Stafford in the locker room about it too, and they can't use that as an excuse. I think. I think the forwards were willing to accept it this year. That listen, Stafford was playing well. The offense was playing well, and if Stafford doesn't get hurt, which was an anomaly since his second year. He's played every game for, however many years, 8 years. So you didn't expect it, but now certainly you have to be prepared for that. No matter what Stafford says he's going to be, he can throw right now. He feels good. He's going to be ready for the offseason program in April. But you can't bet on that. You can't just hope that he's going to be at 32 with coming off 2 different back injuries. He's going to be ready.
I know he said he's not worried about it. I mean, it's 2 back injuries, and I would be worried. And even if you're not, you have to. I mean, it's negligence to not have insurance at that position. And Bob did say that, maybe he'll be willing to spend a little more money on the backup quarterback position. It's tough, obviously, when you're paying a quarterback so much money. But look, Matthew's number, the cap number, has come down now in comparison to other quarterback situations around the league. So maybe the Lions do have a little more flexibility to go out and get that backup quarterback to backstop that. You mentioned the one question that Mike asked about Quandre. The one question that I asked Bob, or one of the questions, I guess, that just, when I asked him to defend bringing Matt Patricia back for a 3rd season, and coming off, what's changed from when 9 wins wasn't good enough to now 9 being in a couple years. It wasn't like the I don't know. It just wasn't like the best defense of Matt. Like, hey, we got this G. It was more about, hey, the Fords didn't want to rebuild and everything, and they didn't want to start in the basement again.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, I know we've had this discussion before, but that's not a reason to me to not make a change. I mean, like that just, I don't know. It left me with a lot more questions about going forward. The direction of this team, and why buy in, I guess. I mean, what real reason is there to expect change going forward other than I agree with him on some level that, I do think early on in the season we saw, and I think we talked about it early on in the year, the roster seemed better. It seemed like the offense was playing better. It seemed like they still didn't have any of those real blue chip players, outside of, maybe Stafford because he was playing well in Galladay, but, defensively they didn't have a whole lot of playmakers, but it seemed like overall they were on a better track. But, I don't know. So maybe the opportunity to get one of those blue chip players at the top of the draft now really helps them out.
Well, I think that was a very interesting answer because it wasn't so much of look at what we've done. It's do you want to? What's the alternative? The alternative is
it's a good way to put it.
Potential, rebuild from nothing. Because obviously the Packers didn't fire Mike McCarthy and start over, and because look at what would have happened if they'd hired somebody like Matt LaFleur. They would have started from the basement, Dave. Right. And where would the Packers be today? Right.
Well, yeah.
Number 1 seed in the NFC. That's where they would have been. You cannot, like you say, you can't be afraid of making a change. That's not a good answer. I would have rather seen Bob Quinn say, listen, our evaluation process is better. We, our whatever, our long-term goals are meshing better with our short-term goals. This and that. Look at how much we've improved here and there, whatever. Over 2 seasons, not even just this season, because I think that would be a better defense for Bob Quinn to say, look at what we've done in 2 seasons versus just this season, which he called abnormal, and for various reasons. So that really isn't a good answer of, well, look, it could be, don't break up with me because look who's out there. You could get a much worse boyfriend. I'm better. I'm terrible to you, but there could be worse options. I mean, that's not a good answer.
Didn't I use that? We were talking about girlfriends,
you brought
sisters.
It weird. You made it weird
like that before.
I tried not to make it weird.
I want to go back and watch the tape on that one because I think I
watch
put that
the tape,
in.
Dave.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I think just the point is that right at the end of the day, like they need to make a huge leap forward next year. And how are they going to do that? Is it going to be players? Is it going to be coaches? Is it going to be scheme? Is it going to be all of it? What are these changes going to be? And no one had any clear answers. And I understand it's January. It's not even January, but it's the first day after the season. So maybe there aren't these, you don't know exactly what path you're going to go down. But I just think, coming off a season when it was so disappointing, it just, I don't know. It still left me feeling a little empty walking away from the news conferences today.
Okay, so here's a question: Is it better for Patricia to take the reins of this thing, or defensively, or to go get a defensive coordinator and have definitely some influence and input on what's happening, but do that and function more as the head coach, executive guy?
I think it's unrealistic for the Lions to go out and get a defensive coordinator that would have a drastically different philosophy, scheme, whatever, because they've already built this defense in Patricia's image. And, I've said it before, right? Maybe you could get a Gerard Mayo. I don't know why he would leave the Patriots, to come do this other than maybe his relationship with Matt, or maybe Steve Gregory is the young assistant that they really feel comfortable with, handing the reins of the defense to. So, there's a different mindset in there, I guess, but you can't go out and hire a completely new coordinator who. So it's
but somebody
it's
who
still,
could work within the confines of the players that they have.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, because I think Patricia has been very involved with this from day one, and I think he will be. He's a very hands-on coach when it comes to that, and I don't ever see that changing. I mean, we talked about it from year one, where he would have his back turned on the offense at times because he's coaching those guys, and it's good in one way that he's interacting with those guys, but that's also, I mean, that tells you, how involved he is on that side of the ball, and it's Darrell Bevel's offense, and there's a pretty clear, delineation there. So I don't know that bringing in a new coordinator is going to drastically change things. I just think, kind of back to what we were talking about earlier, right? Where, well, you don't want to start over from the basement. Well, if you're starting over with a new regime, like, why would you be at the basement if you feel that you have enough parts and pieces in place now that you're not in the basement? That you think this is an abnormal season. So. I don't know. I just keep. I know my thoughts are kind of all over here, but I'm just a little. It didn't provide much hopefulness, I guess, to those Lions fans out there looking for some hopefulness.
I hope that he has enough. Patricia has enough, people that he trusts as sounding boards. Somebody, veteran voice, whoever it might be, who he can count on, and maybe that's Pasqualoni now, maybe, but somebody that he could really work off of and with, as far as doing what he needs to do to tweak that defense. Because I think Trey Flowers was probably played a little bit too early with that shoulder problem, and Snacks was a blue chip player coming into the season. You thought he's going to be just as effective as he was last year. Having those two guys, two star players that you're counting on, not help you early in the season was hard, and I think that's difficult to overcome.
Darius Slay was hurt early on too. Let's not forget that. He was dealing with the hamstring, I think it was.
Darius Slay. Quandre had a little bit of an injury too. He missed a couple games, right? Right before. So that all those little things. You have to have enough. I don't know what it might be, brain power to sort of like overcome that, and how do we disguise things? How do we mix in different guys? Because it wasn't enough this year. You have to be prepared for that. People are always going to get hurt, I think it was a little bit more than they expected this year, but who could it be? Who could you bring in a Gerard Mayo that you really count on, that you could really lean on and say, what do we do here? What can we, as smart as Matt Patricia is and experienced with his defense, another voice that you can count on might not hurt.
Well, I think you'd like to think, and I don't know enough about Mayo to say this for certain, but I mean, he played recently in the NFL and at a very high level. So a guy like that would have, he would instantly connect with a lot of the locker room. I think have some instant respect. Whereas, Pasqualoni's 70 years old, so it's a different. You're talking of a different generation there, and obviously he knows a lot of football. That's not saying anything about that, but you're connecting on a different level with a young guy. I don't know. I mean, I think. Look, the Lions had a lot of things go wrong this year, right? I don't. The injuries, yes, they're a factor, but I don't. Mike Rothstein, again, friend of the program, he pointed out when we were sitting in that room back there that they had 5 guys in injury reserve at Thanksgiving. So it's not like, yes, injuries were a factor, but it's not like it was this abnormal amount of injuries. I think it was the Packers in 2011 or whenever they won the Super Bowl. I remember being at the Super Bowl and they had 18 guys on injury reserve. It's not something you can't overcome. The Steelers, we've talked about that before, to very key positions, just like the Lions, came within a whisker of making the playoffs. Not good enough. The Lions don't want to be there, but that's why the end of the season, 9 straight losses, the way things snowball, that's why it feels so bad too.
Yeah, you have to, and that's Bob Quinn, with the depth. That was the question it was related to, is the depth. Do you have enough? And that's where he kind of said, well, we had it, but everybody was hurt and this and that. So he's kind of right. There were a lot of guys in IR, not up until Thanksgiving, only 5. That's not that many. So
a lot of those guys went on IR when the season got out of hand. I mean, talking to Mike Daniels today, he said he could have played. He said he could play a game if it was next week. Right. But, when the season got out of hand, they put him on IR.
I mean, yeah.
I don't know if he wouldn't have had an impact. He would. I mean, just judging by what he did this year, he's hurt all season. Yeah. But that's surely signing the Lions wish they had back.
Yeah. Yeah, it's gonna be tough for them to find. I mean, I think that the depth was okay this year. I don't think it was a big thing where, like you said, they didn't have blue chip players, but they had enough players, enough guys who could step in and, whether they're rookies or some free agent guys, to stay competitive. They weren't out there getting manhandled. I mean, like yesterday we talked about it, with all the guys out there running around on defense and still holding the lead,
And I don't see that's another excuse that I don't totally buy. I mean, yes, they led in 14 and 16 games. I think it was six or seven games that they had to lead in the second half that they lost. But it's close games in the NFL. Like every game is close. They talk about that all the time, right? 75% of games are within a touchdown or whatever. It's supposed to be close. You don't get any award for playing in a bunch of close games. You get it for winning games, and the Lions didn't do that this year. And I know they've talked about finishing. We got to finish. We got to learn how to finish better, So that's going to be a big focus of the offseason. But I don't know. I don't know that that's the right focus. I think the right focus needs to be better players, better coaches, better scheme, whatever it is. Like I think that's what's going to put them over the top. Not, hey, we're going to learn how to finish better. That's a little too broad for me to, without hearing more specifics of how you go about doing that to say, yep, that's the ticket. All of a sudden, you're going to win 10 games next year.
I think one of the things that's going to be interesting is to see how, and Stafford would play a big part in this because I think the offense, definitely when Stafford left, I don't remember enough about when he was still playing, but when Jeff Driscoll was in there, David Blau, yesterday's game was a good example of it where they had the lead. It was a 10-point lead, 7-point lead, something like that. And the Lions just shut it down. They just went conservative. We're just going to run the ball every single time. Maybe a short little pass here and there, on third down. But it was like run. And the Packers shut it down. They just loaded the box. They shut it down. And they kept the Lions. What did you say? A 13-second drive on one of the last drives for the Lions,
3 and out. Punt. They need 50 yards to get a field goal.
And
13 seconds.
And this is the thing. I mean, at the end of the first half, when they had the 17-3 lead, David Blau was actually playing well. He was starting to throw the ball, hit his receivers. He was playing better than Aaron Rodgers, And I mean, he was at that time. He was, and you could see him feeling comfortable. And then they had the lead, and it was like, well, let's just shut it down and run the ball now. Let's not have any turnovers and whatever. And then he starts pressing. He throws the one bad interception, which, oh, my God, interception. You can never have that in the NFL. Never throw the ball again.
He was 13 of 29. I mean, I'll disagree with you.
At the beginning, he struggled. Great. At the beginning, he struggled. In the middle, he was pretty good. I would have let him kept throwing the ball. And that's what – I mean, the Packers threw on fourth down. They threw on whatever it was, 4th and 1, they threw. You can't be scared. And yes, it's Aaron Rodgers, but you can't be scared to get yards, And if you're just going to be conservative, this is what happens. This is how you don't finish games. One of the ways. I mean, part of it is defensively, you have to hold leads as well. But when your defense isn't up to when you have Steve Longo running around out there, your offense has to do a little bit more. And that's where I think that just – and I don't know if this is Patricia's mindset with the defense of being conservative and let's not screw up and let's play a lot of defensive backs and bend don't break. And does that translate to the offense as well?
I don't have it in front of me, and it's going to take me a minute to find it on my phone, so I'm not going to do it. But I mentioned that when we were in the room, the Edge Sports, their coaches rankings. Part of that, a lot of that. This is a statistical analytical site. Patricia checked in 31st of NFL head coaches this year. And a lot of that is based on that, how conservative are you versus how willing to take some of those chances are you and put your team in better positions. And I think that goes for as much as people, really like what happened on offense this year. And I think Darrell Bevell did a good job, both with Matthew Stafford and when he was forced to make quarterback changes. You look at the Lions' production, so much of it came in the first quarter. They were one of the best first quarter teams in the NFL this year. And then things just fell off a cliff after that. And I think that's one thing that it concerns me about the offense going forward. That has to change. That Bevel had these really good opening game scripts a lot of times, but then once they got out of that script, the defenses were able to shut the Lions' offense down, or at least really stop the bleeding in a lot of ways. And so that's one thing I think they need to fix as well. They need to. You're right that I don't know so much about with Blau because he's David Blau, third-string quarterback. The Lions were going to struggle to move the ball there. But overall, I think they need to keep the foot on the gas a little bit more, keep attacking, and maybe that helps them sustain those leads a little bit better because I think the defense had a really rough year, but I think there's a lot of fault that lies in the offense with that too.
Yeah, and I think when you had Kenny Golladay running around and Marvin Jones and Amendola, these guys, even the running backs were pretty good this year. I mean, they when that's something you can count on, keep doing it, keep using them, get them involved. And I think Darrell Bevell, and that's a question of how much is it Bevell not, having the right, drawing up the right plays or making the right calls, or how much of it is maybe Patricia saying let's not make stupid and take unnecessary chances here. There has to be a blend of both. You got to be smart when you really need to, when the game's online or whatever. You can understand that. Don't throw at the goal line with the Super Bowl on the line, right? Give it to Marshawn Lynch. But in other cases, keep it up. You got the hot hand. You got David Blau. Like he's feeling good. He's throwing the ball. Doesn't get to throw the ball a lot. Let him throw the ball if he's doing well. Keep riding with that. Keep feeding him. So that's going to be a good question, like going into next season. And as we saw Stafford with the trust me thing, there was probably some frustration early on with that too. Of like, listen, I know what I'm doing here. Don't handcuff me so much. Let's not handcuff the offense when it's playing well.
Bevell did give the ball to his Marshawn Lynch yesterday on 4th and 1. Kerryon plunged in, got that touchdown. All right, so let's wrap it up. I mean, again, Bob Quinn, we'll be talking about this for a couple days, weeks, even just sort of dissecting what he said and what it means for the offseason. But was there anything else today that you heard from the locker room, from Matt Patricia, from Bob that stood out? Any other nuggets of info that we should share with the viewers, the listeners out there before we sign off until the spring, I guess?
Well, I talked to Kerryon Johnson in the locker room today before we left, and he just said that this year he's going to be able to go in the offseason not hurt, not having to rehab. So that'll be a good offseason for him. Last year, was his, your rookie year, you go through all the camp stuff and the combine and all that. You don't really get an offseason. And then his rookie year, he came off the left knee injury, so he was rehabbing. This year he doesn't. So this will be an interesting offseason for him. I think that was exciting to watch the potential of what he and Bo Scarborough can do next season. If those guys are healthy, that could be a nice 1-2 punch. I mean, I think you've mentioned it before. That would be an interesting a mix. Ty Johnson mixing it in there for a speed factor. And then Sam Martin was the other guy I talked to. Other people caught up to him as well. The punter he said he totally had not thought about this at all. Of course, what his future is with the Lions. But it's going to be interesting. And Don Muhlbach, who I didn't talk to today, but long snapper, he's also a free agent. And talking to Matt Prater about it today, it's like, man, that battery might change quite a bit, And I think Matt Prater at this level, you're going to find guys you work with, pretty well. But Muhlbach's been a really consistent snapper. Martin's had a pretty good career as a holder, and fairly dependable as a punter. So it'll be interesting to see what you take for granted that these guys don't screw up most of the time, and then suddenly when you get somebody else in there, then you can have a lot of problems. So hopefully those guys either come back or they find the right replacements to keep it going.
All right, so I lied. We are going to do one other thing. And just one other note from today. Christian Jones, he did say shoulder surgery is out 2 to 4 months. Kenny Wiggins is coming back from his own surgery. He's a free agent. He's going to be out, 4 to 6 months. So the Lions have a lot of injury issues to navigate this offseason. Kenny Golladay was fine after yesterday when he was pulled out to be evaluated for a brain injury. But, all right, so since you mentioned Sam Martin, and I talked to him briefly too, I'm just going to throw some names out at you real quick. All I want is a yes or no. Are they back next year or not? These are free agents, key players.
Okay.
Are they back next year or not? Damon Harrison.
No.
I didn't hear his news conference yesterday, but judging by the tone of it, I'm going to say no as well.
Most of it was crying, so I would say no.
Okay. Sam Martin. No, because I think someone else will give him a better offer, probably. No, I think Lions made him take a pay cut this year. I certainly can see him going elsewhere. Don't think he'll be back. And agree, somebody's going to pay him a little bit of money.
Make him a low ball offer, I think.
Yeah, I mean he'll have some options, whatever it is. So, Don Muhlbach.
Yes,
agree. I just don't know that he can walk away from football. 38 years old, but the Lions did add a long snapper for their futures.
Is
the
he
futures
back? Jimmy
contract.
Landis is back.
Not Jimmy Landis.
You watch.
Ashawn Robinson, who talked to the media today as well. Ashawn Robinson, he back or gone?
No, he's gone.
Gone. Graham Glasgow,
gone.
Gone. Just don't think the Lions want to pay how much money he's going to get.
Wants to feel wanted.
he wants to feel wanted. But also, Richie Incognito got $7 million, which Richie Incognito's 37 years old. I'm sorry. Glasgow will be 28 next year. Incognito got $7 million a year. Glasgow is going to get paid in free agency.
The Raiders. How much are they paying Gurdon? $100 million for 10 years?
Yeah.
Oh, my God. Just remember this, Lions fans. Just be grateful that you're not a Raiders or Browns fan.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of who are the other major free agents that we're missing. That's about all of them, right? Is there
Jeff
anybody
Driscoll.
missing? Jeff Driscoll, gone.
Wow.
How about you?
Gone.
Okay, we agree on all these. Last one, Darius Slay, gone or back. This will end it. This will do it for us here at the end of the 2019 season. Carlos, Darius Slay, here or back, or here or gone in 2020.
Here, and one of the reasons why is because Bob Quinn said you asked him this one. I know it was you, and he said you asked how many trade offers did you get or whatever, this and that. How serious were they? And he said they were not serious at all.
I also asked him if he considers Slay a piece of his long-term, future, and he said I already answered that when he didn't. So I don't know if that.
Well, he said he wouldn't answer. He wouldn't talk about any players' contracts because he was asked, "Is he going to be here next year?"
Totally different question.
And he said, "I'm not going to get into contracts."
The first question was, is it sort of an either-or situation? Do you need to extend him?
Right.
Do you need to trade him? Is there some
Right.
common ground, whatever? And he said, I'm not getting into contracts. When I asked him about Slay the second time, do you consider him a long-term part of this, of your future, a part of your long-term future? I already answered that. No, he didn't.
That was two mistakes in reporting. Was one, the question you never ask someone a black and white yes or no. Those questions rarely
after
get answered.
you've already
And
given
then
them a
when
chance.
And then when you came back, you should have said, "This has nothing to do with his contract, Bob. But do you expect him to be a long term?"
I did say no, you didn't, but then he just went on to the next question.
Yeah, he was gonna weasel his way out of that.
But no, at
He
some point,
he wants to leave his options open because if someone's stupid enough to give him 2 first-rounders, sure, he'll take them.
he once said Eric Ebron was going to be part of the future. So he didn't give the. And that
He
was
said he's
before
under
he was-
contract now. That's what he said. He's under
he
contract
said-
right now, and then they got rid of. They didn't renew
whatever.
it. They dropped him.
Well, regardless, my
You
answer.
expect him?
I'm going to say no still. I mean, again,
No.
I know we talked about this the other day that I'm sort of in the minority now that I because there's a win now mandate and because Slay has after he took that Quandre Diggs trade very hard. It's not like he's disruptive in the locker room or anything. I mean, let's make that very clear. But I think those initial comments, Matt Patricia knew how the trade was going to sit with Darius Slay, and he, sort of knew that Slay was going to speak his mind about that. And so I think a lot of people looked at that as, he's really speaking out, and he did. But that's secondary, I guess, to why I think that. I think he still wants money, right? He still wants a new contract. I think the Lions, no matter how serious those talks or not they did have some trade conversations around the deadline with him. They will have some more trade conversations with him before the draft. I think there'll be enough compensation. I think the Lions will sign a free agent cornerback. Rashaan Melvin's a free agent as well. I think they can spend some money there, given the Tracy Walker and Will Harris both being on cheap contracts at the safety position. I'm going to say no. Darius Slay has played his last game as a Lion. He will not be back. Even though our Media Good Guy Award winner, I'd love to see him back here in Detroit.
So, okay, who are your starting quarterbacks next year then?
A free agent somewhere, Justin Coleman, and another free agent, or maybe a rookie. I mean,
Oh yeah, that's gonna for a win now mandate. Yeah, cornerbacks. Yeah,
dude, they roll with that safety this year. They rolled with Will Harris, a third-round pick, and Tracy Walker, who played okay the year before. Amani, who got not as much playing time as Tracy Walker did as a rookie, but Amani was okay for when he was on the field for the 4 games or whatever that he played. So I don't think he's the solution. But again, can you roll with him as your number 3 cornerback if you have Justin Coleman and you go out and sign Byron Jones or somebody in free agency, and then you add another rookie high in the draft? That's your top 4 cornerbacks right there. Not the most ideal. Again,
No.
I like Darius Slay. I would like Darius Slay back in Detroit, but I don't know. I just think at the end of the day, there's still the money issue. And that's a tough one to broach for this team.
Yeah, I just think you cannot. You said it. They don't have a lot of blue chip players, and Slay is one of the few blue chip players they have, especially on defense now. You're gonna have other holes to plug, like defensive tackle, defensive end. There's gonna be a lot of other things. I mean, don't mess with. You have a really good player there. Who I don't know if it was Bob Quinn who said at one time, "I'm not in the business of getting rid of good players." So he's an elite player. I mean, it'd be dumb I don't, and so you get more draft capital, whatever. A rookie is not going to solve your problems. It's very. Don't give me the Denzel Ward thing either.
Ward. Jeff Okudah. They're going to have Jeff Okudah at number 3. Jeff Okudah had a really good game the other day.
College.
I know, man. He's a stud.
Okay, he's a stud, but are you going to are you going to bet your career? Are you going to bet your career on Jeff Okudah, on a rookie cornerback? And not only this, but and maybe it doesn't matter because it's like they're not looking at a long-term thing, whatever. But if Bob Quinn screws up and they get rid of the Quandre Diggs thing doesn't make him look good, right? It looks like a mistake the way he's played in Seattle, So the Darius Slay getting rid of a Pro Bowler, and he's going to be a Pro Bowler next year. If he goes to another team, maybe an All-Pro, then that makes you look bad. Well, you have this rookie who's struggling, or the rookie got hurt, or whatever, blah blah blah. Then that's one of the big things that you're going to struggle with. And Justin Coleman, Bob Quinn said it himself. He had a dip in the middle of the season, and they paid him a lot of money. Just because you go get a free agent doesn't mean they're going to be great necessarily.
Absolutely. Maybe we'll have to make another lunch bet on this since you owe me one already, and we're tabling that till the spring.
That's just too much of a premium position to screw with it. I wouldn't do it.
I don't
swallow your pride and just
again. Bob also said today, he's not going to make the long-term, short-term discussion on what sort of decisions you have to make.
No.
Do
you believe that?
Yeah, I do.
He's going to use the long-term and the short-term lens.
No, I do.
When he can be fired after next year.
Because I think he's 100% right. If you make all these short-term decisions, you're just going to be fired next year when they don't work, when they backfire in your face. You still have to strike a balance with that. And paying Darius Slay from a team's perspective is probably not the right thing to do because, yes, you can get one more year out of him. But if he wants $15, $16 million a year, whatever the going rate that he thinks he can get, and then he's going to miss all spring, once again, and I don't think that's a big deal, right? Players can do their own thing. But he comes into camp, unhappy again. He dealt with the hamstring early this year. Who knows if that's a side effect from that? You still have this, potentially unhappy player, potentially hurt player who still wants money. I think there's a lot there that, yes, it would hurt the Lions on the field. And again, I'm all for the Lions, paying selfishly. I want the Lions to pay Darius Slay and for them to keep him in town. But I think if you make just a strict business decision from the Lions standpoint, and you can get, let's just say, a second-round pick for Darius Slay, I don't know. I think that's a trade that might be tough for the Lions to pass up on.
Well, I think they'd have to have a really strong indication from Darius Slay's agent or from him or his agent that he would be holding out. Did did Jalen Ramsey hold out?
Jalen Ramsey,
or did he?
Well, he sat out the middle of the season, a few games.
If
he faked his back injury,
if he pulled something like that, I don't think Slay would do that. I don't get that feeling. I think he'd miss the offseason stuff again, but I think he'd show up to training camp. He's never been a guy who's had to worry about being out of shape, whatever. So I think he'd be fine. But if they had a strong indication that he's going to be disruptive and be holding out and all that, then I would say, all right, you got to get rid of him. But if they don't have that indication, then roll with him. Do what you can. Can you massage the contract a little bit? Give him a little bit of a raise this year. Make him a little
worked
happy.
real well with Damon Harrison. So why not do it again?
Well, Damon Harrison's a different story.
Maybe. Well, I guess these are the questions that we'll wait to have answered in the offseason. Again, Bob Quinn, Matt Patricia, Matthew Stafford, all of them spoke today, sort of wrapping up the season, and we'll wrap it up here as well. Carlos, I probably won't see you for a while, huh? April-ish?
June.
Wow.
No.
Good.
September.
Oh, lucky me.
September.
God, I am a lucky guy. No, but a good season as always. Good videos as always. We always have fun talking about this stuff, and we will continue to do it at some point here this offseason. But that'll do it for now. From out here in Allen Park, for Carlos Monarrez, I'm Dave Birkett, Freep.com.